Welcome to Time Travel Tuesday. I'm Lisa, one of the interpreters here at Bradensville. Today we'll be taking a look at corn, which was not just central to the diets of European settlers, but also to the Native Americans.
In fact, corn is a crop of the Western Hemisphere. It was first cultivated about 10,000 years ago in what is now Mexico. Over the centuries, Native peoples worked to improve the crop, and it spread throughout the Americas, probably reaching the Carolinas around 1800 years ago. European explorers, including Columbus, were quick to take seeds for this useful plant back to Europe, and it spread rapidly across the continent and into Africa and Asia. By the 1600s, it was common throughout southern Europe, although the early British settlers, including the Scotch-Irish who settled in the Carolina Backcountry, may not have encountered it before their arrival in the New World. Following the Native American practice, corn was often grown in combination with two other crops, beans and squash. Native peoples referred to this grouping as the Three Sisters, and putting these three crops together had numerous benefits. Corn uses a lot of nitrogen from the soil. Beans put nitrogen into the soil. Beans can climb up the corn stalks, eliminating the needs for separate bean poles. Squash prefers humid, somewhat shady areas. The corn and the beans provide the shade. And the broad leaves of the squash help keep down the weeds and hold moisture in the soil. Many recipes that we think of when we think of corn are actually European adaptations of Native American foods. Hominy, grits, roasted corn, and cornbread were all Native American inventions. As corn entered the diet of European settlers, it began to appear in their cookbooks, often referred to as Indian corn or Indian meal. Soon, corn became a constant on American tables. The first cookbook published in America, American Cookery, which was published in 1796, has 2 recipes that use cornmeal. The Carolina Housewife, published in 1851, includes 35 different versions of cornbread alone.
Corn is now grown all over the world. Besides finding its way into our diets, it's also used to feed livestock, fuel machines, and even seal envelopes. Many cosmetics contain corn, as do artificial sweeteners, some hand soaps, and Windex. Corn has been used to make tires, plastics, spark plugs, and diapers. But its most important use may be how it ties us to our ancestors every time we put it on our plates.
While there are a lot of corn recipes out there that we're familiar with, one that we don't see quite as often is succotash. And we're going to see about making some succotash today. I've got my bacon, corn, squash, and beans. You can use any kind of beans. I don't have a particular recipe for this because there are so many different versions of it. So we're just going to put the ingredients together and cook it up. So the first ingredient that we're going to work with here is the bacon. Succotash is actually a Native American recipe. They were cooking it way before Europeans came here. They didn't have pigs until the Europeans brought them here. So they would be using venison or bear meat or something like that. But we're going to use bacon because everybody loves bacon. Succotash doesn't always include squash. There's lots of different recipes that use lots of different things besides corn and beans. But I wanted to use squash because we mentioned earlier the Three Sisters, squash, corn, and beans. And this is a way of cooking all of those things together. And I'm just going to take my squash here and start dicing it up. So to get our corn, you can buy canned corn if you want. Of course, they didn't have canned corn then. So you take your corn, you can use dried corn if it's fall or winter, but now in the summertime, it's a good time to just take the corn and just slice it right off the cob. And your beans can also be canned or they can be fresh beans. They can be dried beans. If you use dried beans, you need to soak them overnight so that they're ready to cook. Here I've got my squash and my corn. I think they're using the beans. beans.
regular lima beans, but you can use kidney beans, or any old kind of beans. Probably add some more corn to that. Get it all stirred up, and just cook it through. So here's our finished succotash, and I wish you could smell it because it smells really good. You can add a little salt to it, a little pepper. And if it's fall, you can actually use pumpkin instead of squash. If you want it to be vegetarian, you just leave out the meat. It makes a good side dish. It makes a good entree. So this is our succotash, made from the Three Sisters, just like the Native Americans would have done it. Corn is something we don't give a lot of thought to, but it's an important part of our history. The next time you enjoy cornbread or corn on the cob, remember that you're continuing a tradition 10,000 years in the making. Thank you for joining us for Time Travel Tuesday.